Hello and welcome back to Mirror's Signal podcast, your weekly podcast sponsored by knowledgeably instructor training, award-winning CPD providers. Make sure you stay tuned to the episode to get your discount code from them. Today's episode, we are joined by a recently qualified ADI, Joe, talking about his qualifying process. So we go into quite a bit of detail on his part three, the fail and the pass and the comparisons between the two. We also discussed a few things kind of instructor related, like should we be telling our pupils? Should we be asking our pupils? How do we manage that in the car? The importance of CPD and what you should expect from your training as well, and how Joe was coming away from his sessions with his trainer feeling and highlighting the good and how the training worked for him to go on and qualify as a driving instructor. So lots of good information in this episode, especially if you're starting the process to become a driving instructor. If you are finding these episodes useful, please make sure that you subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. And if you've got any questions for me, you can find me in the Facebook group or on the Facebook page. They're both available at Mirror's Signal Podcast, or you can just reach out to me in the comments and I will answer when I can. So for now, we will get on with the episode. I hope you all enjoy. Joe, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me tonight. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Excited for this episode, talking
Hey.
about qualifying, delving into a little bit of some part threes, maybe some
Mm.
do's and don'ts, and
Definitely.
how you got on. But let's get straight in. How was your journey to become where you are now as an ADI?
Um, I have to say, certainly good fun. So my journey began beginning of 2023. Um, I I've always had a bit of a love for cars. I've had a teaching background for 10-ish years now, and lots of friends and family said you make such a good driving instructor. You know, you've got patience of a saint. And I thought, you know what? Let's jump into it. Let's do it. So of course, started all that process, DBS check and all of that. Flew through my theory. That was I found that all right. I have to admit, I was one that used the apps a fair bit. I'll be totally honest there. But I do have plenty of books that I keep in the car with me now as well. And then, of course, went on hold for my part two, expecting months and months of waiting. And actually, I got a phone call from the DVSA, which was surprising. So, passed my theory middle of February, and then got a phone call from a withheld number on the 2nd of March, which I don't normally answer. I'll be honest. And something compelled me to. I picked it up. It was them offering me a part two cancellation for the week after. So I was like, right, I need to get all my part two training done because I'd already started some of it, but I had some to finish. So I very quickly messaged my instructor. And was like, I've just got a part two. Can we finish this next week? And it was like, yeah. So yeah, went through all of that. Of course, nerves always going to hit you for any form of test. And then went through my part two. There were two occasions where I thought, no, I've absolutely failed this. Um, got back to the test centre an hour and 50 minutes later with a pass. So I'm really pleased with that. And then the part three stuff started. So that's where it got fun.
Before we jump onto the part three, for the benefit of the listeners, I need to know what those two areas were that you thought you'd failed on your part two, because you threw them in very quickly. I'm like, oh, we
True.
need to know about that, I reckon.
So the first one I had a parallel park and a pull up on the right on my part two, and on the parallel park I was bringing the front of the car in. I thought, yeah, I've done really well at this, and then hit up against the curb. Now it wasn't a big hit, but I thought I know part two got to be quite high standard. I reckon he might have me on that. And as it turns out, that wasn't even mentioned. So maybe either ignored it or he didn't care. One of those two. And then my second point, which was about 5 minutes after, I was coming up to it's called it's a gyratory system according to the examiner. I just call it a big roundabout. And I was coming up there, taking the second exit, and I put my indicator on. I looked right, and I went on, and I didn't check any of my mirrors. And I thought, come on, I've got to be a serious all day long. No, didn't even get a driver fault for it. But he did give me a driver fault for going around a different roundabout too quickly when I don't feel I did. I'll take a pass.
It's interesting. And do you know, I wanted to talk about that because we very much can fall into, and we're going to talk about in the part three stage as well, fall into, oh, I failed there, I've touched the curb, I'm going to give up now. And
Mm,
I think sometimes that works for people. I know it does for my learners. When they think they failed in the first 5 minutes, they go on to do a great drive because they don't care anymore.
yeah,
But some people can almost be thinking about that fault far too much and then commit a serious fault later down the line. So I think it's really important for people, especially for the part two and the wait time and everything else, is it's easy for me to say, but try not to focus on whether it's a pass or a fail in any specific situation and just drive the best way you can until
yeah,
they give you the result at the end, because your view on something could be different to an examiner. As you've said there, you didn't think it was too fast, the examiner thought it was, but you'd probably have accepted a fail for brushing the curb on a parallel park.
yeah. Given that reading everything online and hearing other PDIs and ADIs experience on the part two, they're all saying it's really, really high standard. You got to drive really well. Obviously, you're only allowed 6 driver faults in. Well, for me, it was an hour and 15 minutes, but normally it's about an hour. Um, and of course, they're looking for really good use of the controls. And I just thought, well, did that show a really good use of the controls, or did it not? So, but yeah, it was definitely in the back of my mind. And I think, like you say, when when that happened and when the other bit happened with the mirrors, and then it was just like, well, I might as well just keep going. Yeah, I'm not expecting a pass at the end, but let's just drive and see what else happens. And then, of course, it was actually a pass, which was nice.
Excellent. So there's a bit of insight there into the part two, and they are expecting a higher level of driving to a certain extent. I don't think it's an advanced driving
Mm,
test per se. It's just safe, controlled, and planned, and you'll be all right. So
yeah.
you've done that. You passed your part two. Happy, excited. We move on to part three. How was that?
So, part three training, I found it good fun. Again, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a walk in the park because of my previous teaching background. It's kind of changing how you teach because a lot of what I used to do, and to a degree still do with my other training that I do, it's a lot of telling. Whereas, of course, with this sort of thing, it being client centered, it's a lot of asking and delving into what and why and all of that. So it was quite a shift from the telling to the asking and the questions. Um, but definitely good fun. The What I liked about my training was that bar my first 2.5 hours of my 40 hours that I did, everything was practical. Everything was in the car. It was questions. It wasn't just sat down with a book. This is how you do this. It was practical. Um, my instructor, before my first part three, he even let me come and sit in the back of one of his lessons for a couple of hours, so I could see how it was done, which was brilliant. And then again, before my first and my second part threes, I said to my instructor, I want to do this a different way. I want to be the pupil. I want to make some faults that I might expect my pupil, my part three pupil, to make based on how they drive or they did drive before the part three, um, and see sort of how you deal with it when you deal with it. And he didn't go, oh no, I don't think that's a good idea. He was like, okay, hop in the car then, and off we went. And that for me was it kept it engaging because that's how I learn. I like to see what happens, but hear as well. And it gave me some good insight into when, because obviously that was a big part of the intervention, and on the part three as well. Was the trainer aware of what the pupil was doing? So when I make a fault, when's he going to talk about it? Is he going to leave it 5 minutes or not even talk about it? Like I did in my first part three that we'll come on to. So yeah, that was really really good fun.
Definitely giving me a few questions that we're going to delve into there.
Go
The
for it.
first thing I'd like to mention, though, is that training that you wanted. And I think this is really important for people that are listening or watching, and that you were driving, replicating your pupils to see how the instructor deals with it. And I think there's a real important message there, and that's why we have part two and why they're so closely linked, because you need to be very aware of the standard that needs to happen, and you
Yeah.
need to be able to demonstrate that standard at a conscious level. So
Mm.
then you can replicate faults of a learner is showing a real good in-depth understanding of the practical application of driving, because otherwise, how do we help our learners? And when people are just seeing the part two as it's a driving test that I just need to go and pass. So the more you understand what you're doing and why now, you can do things like you were doing on your part three training, which
Exactly.
that sounds like an excellent method of training. And
Mm.
I don't think I've heard of that, of the PDI, that I'm going to be the student playing out the faults that my students are showing. And I
Yeah.
want to see how you deal with it.
Yeah.
Training, please. How did you
Yeah.
find that?
Um, I found it really insightful because, of course, but just before my part three, we'd gone for a drive, myself and my part three pupil. So I wanted to. Obviously, it wasn't a stage part three. I'd never do that, and to a degree, you can't really. But I wanted to make sure that I was picking them up in good time. I might not necessarily have been as quick as a ADI who's been qualified 20 years, but I was picking them up in good time so that safety wasn't compromised and I could deal with it effectively and make sure that obviously learning's taking place and it is all safe. That's the main thing.
That's good. I love that idea.
Mm,
That's definitely one I'm going to remember for in the future. Sorry, I'm going
yeah.
to steal your method of training.
Go for it. Go for it. If it helps others, I'm all for it.
I love it. That must have been some real good, just confidence building to experience how your trainer is going to deal with a fault that
Mm,
you're playing out. So you know the fault's coming, you know it's happening. How are you going to deal with this? Oh,
yeah,
I get it. That makes sense. I like that. That's a great idea. And I
yeah.
can see how that works.
Mm,
The next question I've got, you say you came from a teaching background and some of the training you still do. I don't know whether you're still doing that now, but what is that background? And is it something that you're still doing alongside the job?
So basically, back when I passed my driving test 9 years ago now, I started work for a security training company. So we did security training. We also did first aid, fire safety, risk assessment training as well. And that's the side that I went into. So I was doing plenty of first aid courses. I'd also been part of the combined cadet force. And as part of that, I was on the training team. So making sure that my cadets were having a good experience while still teaching them. Um, So yeah, I did that until the middle of 2023, before I started doing this full time. But I do still do first aid courses and fire safety and risk assessment as well. Just got to make sure that I keep my training methods almost separate in a way, um, so that I don't start telling in the car, because that was a big thing for me on my part three training. My trainer picked it up very quickly. He said, you need to make sure you're switching this from tell to ask. Very important.
I came from, I guess, a similar background, and I can see where that fits in. I got quite fortunate because I was teaching first aid and some other military skills, being ex-military. And that was very much tell. And then I started finding I was teaching the people that couldn't get the subject with the rest of the group. Because when it's
Yeah,
group-based learning, you either get it or you get left behind, unfortunately.
exactly.
And it was being sent to me, and I was more one-on-one. And I was spending a lot of time finding out why they couldn't get something and
Mm.
understanding where they was. So I was quite fortunate coming into this that I'd kind of been forced to move away from the telling background because, as we know, when people don't get it, doesn't matter how much you tell them, it's
If they
difficult.
don't get it,
Yeah, and we've got to find other ways. And you can slot back into that quite quick in the car as well. I expect it's a challenge for you balancing the both of them and going from one hat to another hat. And it's a really good message for people that, and I mention it all the time, we think we need to tell our learners everything because, well, they're paying us. They're paying
yeah,
me, so I just need to tell them everything. How did you find that transition in the part three training?
that was definitely probably my biggest challenge. Yeah, switching away from that telling, it definitely did. Certainly in my early trainee license days, it definitely did creep back in. Um, Especially when I had my instructor sat in the back, and it's like you've started your lesson, and then 5 minutes in, you're like, I just told them that. I didn't even think about what they, asked them anything at all. So yeah, it was definitely my biggest challenge. And as you say, there are the odd times, even now being qualified just over a year, where it can creep in a little bit, but you very quickly try and, oh, hang on a sec. Let's not tell them that. Let's ask and see what they think. It's not about me, it's about them.
Balance to try and strike is fun because you've mentioned it, client centered. And like for PDIs coming in, I feel for you, especially if you're watching these episodes, because we're talking about we need to ask. But it depends on the learner, because some learners we
Exactly.
need to tell.
Yeah.
And I've got some of those learners now. Additional needs, like they, some of my learners, they need telling
Mm.
because you asked a question and it's like, look, you need to tell me what I should be doing. And it's finding that balance because I'd gone too far the other way. I was asking everything and putting everything on the pupil. And they was like, yeah, I want to do this. I'm like, okay, let's go and do it. It'll go wrong. Would pick up the pieces.
Yeah.
The balance is hard to find, but when you get it, you're like, okay, we can work with this. Were you finding that in your training or as a PDI early on?
Yeah, definitely. Because, like you say, every learner is different. They all learn in different ways. And I had one when I was a trainee, and I had him for a very short while after I qualified as well. And very quickly, I learned the asking method doesn't work. When he's driving along and you're asking him a question, and he's like, yeah. Whereas when you're telling him, he's getting it, he's getting it, and he's getting it. And yeah, it's making sure you understand the learner and of course what they want, but how they want it as well. So if you've got someone that isn't responsive to questions, and it might be that it's just their personality. But if telling them works really well, great. I mean, my one that I had, and I've still got a few now, of course, but he was tell. You know, how do I do this? Well, this is how we do it. Not, you know, what do you reckon's best? And he went and smashed his test first time. So I'll take that.
So to help clarify what we've just said, asking questions is the way to do it. Unless you need to tell people, then that's the way to do it. Just to make it clear for everyone.
Super clear, super clear.
People are going to stop listening to this. But it is important, isn't it? I don't think we can swing too far either way. There's a time and a place. And the biggest thing that I found is when you question on what they was thinking, like what their thoughts, how are they feeling?
Mm,
Because they know the answer to that, whether they're responsive to questions or not. As soon as we get to the thinking, that okay, now I need to tell you X, Y, and Z. So there is a time and a place, and this is why you need to get a good trainer and get out in the car. And
yeah.
Zoom sessions are great for certain things, but I think practical experience, seeing it live, I can't see how you can get any better
Mm,
value training than that.
yeah, I have to say I think the training I had, and of course it's not just my trainer, there's loads of good trainers out there. But I absolutely loved the fact that it was near enough all in the car. It Yeah, it was live, it was role play. You know, I think it was my last 10 hours, I think my instructor just threw me the keys to his car and said, right, I'm your pupil, off we go. And we do a couple of hours or an hour and a half, and then we see how it went. And then the following session, it'd be a different topic and different goal that we'd do. So there was a real variety from like just the basics, moving off and stopping, to split roads, hesitation at roundabouts. It was really good. And one thing I realized actually with those sessions, on the hesitation and roundabouts one, actually, is I'd never, because of how I learned when I first passed, I never actually figured out how to stop hesitation at roundabouts. And so my instructor, who was playing the pupil, would come up to a roundabout and there'd be a blatantly big gap and he wouldn't go. And I'm thinking, how the hell do I sort this out? you know, so being able to do that, we then stopped and it was like, right, how did this work for you? How did you learn this when you were driving? And if I didn't have that, if I feel like if it was just on Zoom, that wouldn't have worked for me. Might have worked for other people, but definitely not for me.
Those situations, I can't see how it can work any other way really than experiencing it in that situation. We can talk and show diagrams, and I think it will add to learning, but I'm not sure how it can replace learning.
Yeah.
And what we see on social media time and time again is, I guess that from people is, I need some in-car training, or I've done loads of Zoom sessions, but I'm not getting it. We'll get out and experience it with a reputable trainer. But what it sounds like, and this is something that I've mentioned a few times, it sounds like your training was client-centered to you. It was like,
Mm,
what do you need? What do you need today? What do you need on these sessions? How can I help you achieve your goal for today? Opposed to, right, we're on lesson 4, and today is, and this is what we're going to do.
yes. Yeah.
Was that how you felt with your training, that it was about you?
Yes, definitely. We did have a little bit of a structure, but it wasn't just right. Well, the book says we're doing this today, so this is what we're going to do. It was always tailored to me and how I learnt. Very much, of course, like an instructor to the pupil. Um, it was a really good way of learning for me, being able to get out and not just have a book and go, right, topic 1A is X, Y, and Z. So this is what we're going to do for the next 2.5 hours. it was very much, you know, right, what do we need to get you through in order to be achieving what you need to do to qualify and to be a good instructor, not just to pass the part three. Because I think a lot of people, a lot of PDIs, their training is to get them through their part three, and it's very much a case of look at your pupils when they pass their driving test. That's not the end of their learning. It's really only the beginning, and it's the same. I feel passing your part three and becoming an ADI. This is the beginning. You know, you're still learning. I'm still learning. I'm sure you're probably still learning. You know, your pupils can surprise you. Um, and a good friend of mine who's an ADI, been an ADI for God knows how long, he always says to me, "Oh, have your pupils surprised you yet?" No, no, until about 3 months ago, and then it was, "Yep, yeah, still learning."
That's a good message there, especially when you said about PDIs might be being taught how to pass a part three, or the structure might be to get a pass on a part three. I think the way I see that is very much like we're teaching test routes. So, okay,
Mm,
if I'm showing you how to pass a part three, as long as everything stays within the boundaries, you're going to pass a
yeah,
part three. But is it preparing you for a career of developing learners and developing yourself, much
mm,
like is teaching test routes, setting your pupils up to be safe drivers for life, or is it getting your learners through a driving test and hope they only ever drive on the test routes for the rest of their life? You know, it's
exactly.
there is much more to it. And if the goal is about how do you develop an individual, and to do that, we need to put you at the center, find out what you know, find out what you don't know as an instructor, and help put those pieces together, then you're going to be equipped with the skills to keep developing yourself as a PDI and as an ADI as you keep going.
Yeah, definitely, and that's the thing. You know, once you qualify, the journey starts, and don't just sit there and go, right, I've qualified, I know everything. Develop yourself, you know, push yourself. For me, I got a high grade B, 39 out of 51 on my part three, my second attempt. When I do eventually get a standards check, I want to be a grade A. That's where I want to be. You know, high 40s would be lovely. Keep pushing yourself. Don't just shut the books. Don't just go all closed. Keep at it. You know, do CPD. Do a decent amount of CPD each year. Read the books. Keep up to date with everything. Otherwise, you'll be stuck where you were, and you'll never pass that on.
Any PDIs that are listening and watching to this and trying to work out if you're getting the right training or training at an adequate level, I think that the passion that you've got for your training and what you went through, were you feeling like that after every session? Were you feeling kind of inspired after sessions that you can go away, even if you needed to learn? Was you coming away positive?
100%. Every single session with my trainer, I came away exhilarated, full of adrenaline, and like, oh my god, this is incredible. This is how what we need to do, and all of that, and obviously put a plan in place for next time. It was brilliant, and yeah, passionate as well, which I feel you've got to be in this job. If you're not passionate, then review would be a big piece of advice for me as well.
Think if you're not coming away from your sessions feeling like this, it might be worth a review. It could be you as an individual, it could be your trainer, it could be the job, it could be a whole factor of things. But if you're not coming away feeling like you can do this, or at least having some direction to put you on the path so you can do this, then yeah, maybe have a look at why. Is
Yeah.
this job for you? Is a question that you need to ask. Like, we're responsible for a lot of risk. And is the trainer right for you? And we need to remember, like, it's a working relationship with our trainer.
Mm.
So even if they're a good, reputable trainer, if the relationship's not there between you and them, you're setting yourself up for a career as a driving instructor, and you want to get on the best footing. To do that, you want a good rapport with your trainer, the way you're going to hope you're going to have a rapport with your learners. Now, if my learners didn't feel like they had a rapport with me, I would happily help them find another driving instructor.
Mm.
And it's about them. And the training you're receiving as a PDI should be about you.
Yeah,
It should be, how do we develop you?
100%. And something else that I did before I committed to the trainer I went with, I spoke to lots of different trainers, schools, had phone calls with a few people, and the one I went for, we met up not far from where I live, and he was honest. He went through everything, and we had a really good chat, had a bit of a laugh, and it was like, this is the one for me. I can get on with him now. You know, that's what you need when you're doing your training for this. One of the calls I remember doing was I phoned a fairly local school to me, and I got through to, I think it was the owner's wife, and I spoke to her about the training. She said, "Yeah, it's my husband that does all the training. You know, this is how he does it. This, and this." I just thought, well, why can't I speak to him? You know, if it's just pay as you go training, are you always going to be available when I need the training? You know, or am I going to be, oh, I can do it in a couple of weeks? You know, and it was just didn't feel right. Whereas the one I went with, it was there straight away. And I still keep in touch with him today, and that's how much I respect him. And he, even though I'm not part of their school anymore, I haven't been for nearly a year, he's still more than happy to give me advice. I think a trainer like that is invaluable.
If you're looking for a trainer, PDIs, this is what you should be looking for. This rapport and, I guess, teamwork and respect, whatever we're going to call it.
Mm.
That's what we need. And if you feel like you're just a number or you're not getting the support, as harsh as it is, if you're in a contract or whatever else, you can always. Sorry, I'm being distracted by the cat. Love that. We've got fish on one background and a cat on the other. If you're not watching on YouTube, go check it out. Um, Now I have lost my thought. But yeah, if you feel like you're a number, if you don't feel like you've got this with your trainer, then you're going to have to invest elsewhere if you want to build a rewarding career and you want to get through the process.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's what we've got to go and do. But we've spoke about the training, and there's some, I think, some really valuable information there for people. But let's now fast forward to the part threes. First one we will talk about first, or you can compare the two however you want to do it. But how did you manage the part threes? What happened with them?
So first part three, I had the same pupil for both my part threes, passed on my second attempt, and the theming both times was similar, uh, and because of that pupil's normal lesson times. So basically, she was quite hesitant at various junctions, but because of her normal lesson times, we couldn't really delve into that because there was next to no traffic. Whereas on both of my part threes being early in the morning, it was rush hour, it was busy. It was like, this is fantastic. This is a really good time to look into that. So first part three, I definitely think nerves played a huge part. And of course, any PDI going into a part three or even a part two, because of course you've only got three attempts at each, you're going to be feeling nerves. Of course you are. And I definitely think that was a big part of my first one. Um, The examiner I had as well, same examiner for my part two. I won't name names, but fairly nice guy, but very tall. I wouldn't say intimidating, but you're a bit like, whoa, okay. Um, and yeah, off we went, and I knew halfway through. Basically, my pupil was making a fault, um, where she wasn't positioning herself correctly to turn right into side roads, and I just wasn't dealing with it. I just ignored it completely, didn't even mention it at all. Went back to the test centre, and I was like, yeah, I didn't even bother. It was very much halfway through I realised it, and my personal thought was I haven't got enough time to deal with this. I've got 5 minutes before I need to head back to the test centre. Screw it, and just kind of at that point gave up a little bit, which looking back now, definitely don't recommend. Um, Stick with it. If you notice something's going wrong, especially something that could be a bit risky, deal with it, even if you've got 5 minutes left, because that might have been the difference between my score of 27 and perhaps even a 31, 32. It gets you over the line, but it's definitely stuff you want to work on. So, yeah, nerves did play a big part of my first part three. But going into my second, like I said, same pupil, similar situation, because I didn't have a long wait between my two part threes, which was quite nice in a way. Get it done and dusted. Managed to get it done a month before my trainee license expired, which was brilliant. Um, Went in, same examiner, and I had a lot more confidence this time, especially after doing some extra training sessions as well. And straight out the bat, we literally come out of the test centre. It was the second left turn. She went around it way too quick. She went wide. I was lucky I didn't need to physically intervene, but I then didn't talk about it until we got to the practice area, which was about 3-4 minutes away. And the examiner said to me, I should have dealt with it straight away because we came up to another junction. I should have made sure she wasn't going to do the same thing, but I didn't. So I definitely had a bit of a delay there. Going through straight away, as soon as we got to the practice area, though, it was a switch from the goal of hesitation over to that approach speed. Dealt with that, and before I knew it, I was back at the test centre thinking, Christ, have I failed again? Have I scraped a pass? What am I doing here? But far less nerves, perhaps, of course, because it was the second attempt. But I'm quite thankful when the examiner showed a pass of 39.
An excellent score for a part three, and well deserved from the sound of it with the training that you got and the work that you had to have been putting in. And I'd like to go back to that first part three where you realized, oh, I've failed now, because I think PDIs do have that same thought, like a driving test, like a part two, where it's like, right, I've made a mistake, I've failed, let's forget about that and move on. And you've said on reflection, you maybe wouldn't have done that. What do you think you would have done differently? If you could go back to your first part three, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently?
So I'd have definitely dealt with the immediate issue straight away. So it was the same initial goal, hesitation at junctions, but didn't sort out the positioning at right turns. And the practice area actually allowed for that because there were a couple of right turns in there. I'd have been straight on it and made sure that got sorted out, because generally I could have done those two things together, because the hesitation was only emerging, it wasn't turning, if that makes sense. Um, I could have generally dealt with those two together, and that's what I would do. If I could rewind the clock and go again, I'd deal with those both together.
That was important on my standards check, was seeing things and dealing with it. And it's hard as a PDI but we sometimes become a little focused on the goal and we don't take that step back and like, let's look at what's happening. Why is it happening? What do we need to fix right
Mm.
now? And the part three in the standards check, they're marked over the lesson. Now, I had two safety critical incidents in my standards check, but we dealt with them. And had that have happened on my part three, in first or second, I think I would have had the mentality I've failed now, and it's all going to go out.
Yeah,
But I found it comes back to that client centered and focus on the pupil in that I just had to forget the examiners there. And it's like, right, what can I do to help this pupil right now so that that situation doesn't happen again? And it sounds like that's what you did on your second part three, albeit a few minutes later,
yeah,
but you still got to it. You're like, right, we've shown a mistake there. We need to figure out why that happened and is it going to happen again? How do we solve it?
yeah, exactly that. And luckily, in a way, it didn't happen again. But if I feel like if I'd have just spoken about it with the pupil, it probably would have at some point because the design of the junctions meant it would have probably happened again at some point, not necessarily on the part three, but of course, being that it's quite an important risk thing, you can't just let it go. Um, and the examiner was very pleased because he actually remembered my first part three as well, which, given the amount of people they see, must be quite surprising. And he said, you know, I was really pleased to see that actually, albeit a little bit late, you dealt with it and you dealt with it properly. And he said that was the only thing I lost marks for was just the timing.
And I think it's the situation as well. You said it's the timing, but you mentioned it a minute ago, was that you did have right turns on the way
Mm,
to the training area where potentially I mean, I don't know the level of the pupil, but it could be something that's just mentioned and managed the risk on the move until you get to the training area.
yeah,
Because you've potentially, if you've not spoke about going wide on a turn the first time it's happened, the next time, and this was an eye opener for me on my training for my standards check, was there could be a bus coming around that corner or a large vehicle.
and funny you say that because the area where my part threes were is an industrial estate, lots of heavy goods vehicles around there. So, of course, like you say, there could be a bus, there could be a lorry coming around that corner, and if you don't deal with it, that could be a head on, you know, and that wouldn't be very good for your part three result, but of course, it wouldn't be very good for anything else either.
Yeah. Or you're encroaching on territory where we need to take action with the car, we need to move the car. And then that can upset the full lesson flow because you've had to use the wheel. We know the effect of that with some pupils when we have to take action to prevent something serious happening. So again, it's another difficult balance, isn't it? It's like we've seen it. When's my next opportunity that this fault could potentially play out and become dangerous, or we can help in a proactive way so that it doesn't happen next time and then it becomes a need potentially to go and fix.
Exactly that. Yeah, it is getting that balance right between something's happening now and is it appropriate now or do I have to just manage the risk, like you say, and then in a couple of minutes, let's deal with this properly.
And we can't spend all night talking about how to pass a part three as much as people are wanting these great insights. And I think it has been. I think the message so far around choosing a trainer and what kind of relationship you should look for with a trainer, and then how you managed the differences on the part three and how that's reflected in the scoring system. You had a fault that you may have noticed happening but didn't do anything about it. Well, we've got a fail for that one. And then your next one that you've passed, you've seen the fault, you've passed, but there's room to improve when we intervene with what's happening on the lesson and what the pupil needs right now, not in 5 minutes' time when we get somewhere else.
Exactly that. Yeah, and one of the things I did was I actually put my test results side by side, and you can just see that actually recognizing what they need in that moment boosts numbers amazingly, and obviously is the difference potentially between a fail and a pass, or potentially even a grade A. So it is really, really important to, it, for example, if you fail your first part three, reflect on why was it that you just completely ignored something? Was it the timing? You know, was it that you let something safety critical happen and you just never dealt with it? It's really important to reflect and, of course, try and make sure it doesn't happen again, but learn from it.
And it is possible to do quite a effective reflection because, like you said, you put your sheets side to side. Like you've got a list of 17 areas. What am I scoring in each of those 17? And if you're scoring low somewhere, you're going to be scoring low in a number of other areas. So it could just be one thing that you're not doing quite right,
Mm.
but you're going to lose points for it potentially.
Yeah, because of course all of them are linked in some way. So if you don't recognize the right goal in that moment, you're going to not just lose points on that category, but was the trainer aware of the pupil's actions? Well, no, because you're not picking up on what they're doing, or if you are, you're not acting on it. So it tumbles from that point, and that's what I found really eye opening. Putting my two side by side is seeing the scores I picked up just by recognizing that one fault and dealing with it. A little bit late, but still dealing with it.
This is the challenge with a 45-minute window as well, I think, because if you're and potentially more for standards check than part three, but they're the same thing and the same process applies in that you might fix things a lesson later, two lessons later. We might put something I'm just going to keep a note of that. And if it comes up again next lesson, we're going to go and fix it. You can't afford to do that on a part three because the examiner's just getting a snapshot of what you do. And whatever
Exactly.
you do on that 45 minutes, that's you as an instructor. Whether we like it or not, that's the system. That's what we've got to work with.
Yeah, in the same way as a normal learner driving test, you could have a pupil that's done 50 hours with you. The examiner only sees 35 to 40 minutes of that. And of course, you could have a pupil who's full of anxiety, full of nerves, who drives amazingly, but the word test can bring them down, and that's really important. Like you say, you can't do that on a standards check. You've got to deal with it there. And of course, one of the pieces of advice my trainer gave me is choose a suitable pupil who, you know, can allow you to show that you can deal with these things. Of course, everyone can choose whoever they like, but I found it a lot better choosing a pupil that had only had, I think she had about 10 hours. Um, by the time I went for my first part three, she was pretty much just at the point where she could do turns, do T junctions. That was it. So I was able to demonstrate that, right, she's made a fault. Let's deal with this, instead of, well, she's only made it once. Like you say, we'll keep a note on that. If it crops up again, then let's deal with it.
Do you think that made it easier for you as the instructor having confidence in your pupil? If we just take out everything else, your mindset going into the part three, did it make it easier for you that you was confident in the pupil you were taking?
Definitely, definitely, because I chose that pupil, one, because we had a really really good rapport, and two, because I know that it sounds silly, but they can work under pressure as well, because of course pupils are going to know there's an examiner in the back. They're going to feel watched, and like a driving test, they're going to have nerves. And of course, they might then go and do things on your part three or your standards check that they don't normally do. And suddenly it's like, oh, hang on a minute, we've got to sort all of this stuff out in addition to what we were working on. So having confidence in your pupil and choosing the right one definitely plays a big part of it, in my opinion.
That was something I was aware of with my standards check, very much who am I taking? And I stupidly didn't tell him it was a test. I just said an examiner's watching. They want to see what driving instructors do.
Yeah.
And when the examiner came out, he said hello to my pupil. He was like, I'm the examiner that's going to be doing Josh's test today. We're just going to sort some paperwork out on the iPad. And I'm like, you just said the word test. I've not told him it's a test.
Mm,
Uh-oh.
yeah. And then suddenly, does it build the nerves for your pupil,
Fortunately, it didn't. And we came out all right. But the choice of pupil and maybe what you tell them about what you're going into is certainly a consideration. We've often got this thought coming into a part three that is like, right, what topic am I going to teach today? And you'll get the response, no, do skills, do this. And all of this focus comes on, what am I going to do on that day? And I think sometimes we need to take a step back, and there's so many different factors that go into it. What pupil are we taking? As you've mentioned, what time of day is it? Because you'd planned it was going to be busier, which worked for the needs of that pupil.
Yeah.
But it could change either the area that you're going to use or the student that you're going to use based on how are we going to show learning's taking place and what's that relationship like with your pupil. And there is many things to consider, but there are people out there that can help and support you to be in the best position for it.
Yeah, definitely. It does play a huge part in the part three. When I went into mine, my pupil knew both times. It was my part three, my qualifying test. Um, and luckily, like I said, because she was able to work under pressure, it was fine. But I do know that I've spoken to some other PDIs and that who have had a pupil and they just go to bits, and then they are firefighting to deal with loads of different things, which must be really difficult when you've got the nerves and the examiner as well.
That's where I think having just a loose plan
Mm,
helps going into a part three. So have a rough idea of what you're going to work on, but
yeah,
be watching your pupil, and everything goes out of the window as soon as something happens. Like, we need to help them with that. Maybe we come back to what the original goal was, but you're dealing with the right now. Much like on a driving test, we're dealing with what's happening right now.
exactly. And I think it's quite important for you as the instructor going into part three standards check. Don't necessarily think about what do you want to work on, because of course that's not client centered. What do they need to work on? Yeah, it might be hesitation at roundabouts, but suddenly they're not checking their mirrors when they're turning left or something like that. Well, that could be quite a safety critical thing. If they're not checking there's a cyclist there, why let that go? Deal with what's happening then. Don't go in thinking, right, today we're going to do slip roads when they can't even do roundabouts yet. Well, that's not going to help them.
And that's, I think, where people come unstuck is we've got a goal, we've got a lesson plan, we're going to do this, we're going to go to this roundabout, then this one here, then we're going to do that, then we're going to discuss, and then we're going to go again. And adapting, I think it's the number one reason that people fail a part three or a standards check. They don't adapt the lesson. And again, we can link this back to a driving test. We know the
Mm,
fault. Why did the fault happen? And it's the
yeah,
same with this. You didn't adapt the lesson. Why didn't you adapt? well, we're not watching the pupil and we're not identifying their needs. And then the cascade effect where the lesson structure is not there and risk management falls off and da 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 da,
Yeah,
it just spirals from there. And I don't want to say it's easy to pass or easy to fail, but if it's set off in the right kind of structure and it spirals the right way, if you notice the folks like you did, oh, they've gone wide there, I'm going to solve this, almost put the goal on the back burner. Let's
yeah,
fix what this is. And then maybe we get back to it. Maybe we move on to something else.
yeah, yeah. I think it's important to remember as well, adapting, I suppose this is how my trainer explained it to me. It's not just deal with the new fault that's come in. So, for example, if they're hesitating at roundabouts and then you go out and you deal with that and then they're not hesitating anymore, well, what else can you do to help them achieve it? Let's find some busier roundabouts. Of course, unfortunately, you do have that time constraint, and it goes like that. I remember on my second attempt, I was in the thick of it, dealing with this pupil, and then I felt this tap on my shoulder. I looked around, the examiner's going back to the test centre. I'm like, I look at the time, and it's like, oh wow. And I think I ended up doing 55 minutes in the end. But yeah, it's not just about the deal with the faults. It's how else can you help them? Well, if they're smashing these roundabouts, it's going to do some busier ones. Going to do some spiral ones if the area allows it, and push them a bit more. Obviously, if something then crops up, well, yeah, deal with it, but make sure that you are helping them, whether that's dealing with the fault or pushing them to become better at themselves.
Works both ways, 100%. And this is why you need to be comfortable with your area because we need to be able to take it back a step and we need to be able to increase the challenge. And we can talk about this. We've been going for a while now. So before we get to listeners' questions, I have a question for you that I'd like some information on. And that
Okay.
is, since you've qualified, is it what you expected of the job?
Yes and no. So yes, in that, like, expecting the how the lessons go and the odd surprise here and there and dealing with lovely pupils. That's all what I expected. But then there's the other side, which, to be honest, given my previous line of work, I should have seen coming, and that is your difficult pupils, the ones that don't pay, the ones that cancel last minute. I also never expected other drivers to be so unsympathetic towards the L plates. I mean, I'll be totally honest. I've had three drivers run red lights in front of my pupil because my pupil stalled. Um, I had a van use a left turn only lane to cut in front of my pupil who was going right at a roundabout, nearly taking the front end of my car off just because my pupil was going a bit slow. That was something I didn't expect. And over time, obviously, you learn to just grit your teeth, but the sheer impatience was definitely a big thing that I was very surprised at when that started. Um, but for the most part, yeah, it's definitely what I expected. It's something that I do really enjoy. Like every job, you have your wobbly moments, and I definitely had a big one last September. I had a pupil go out on her test with an examiner that I've had before who I've got to be quite tactful, of course, but is known for not being very nice, and came back and he wasn't nice. And I actually very nearly jacked it in. I thought, I can't do this. I'm going to become an examiner because I want to make sure that that sort of standard isn't there. Um, but I'm still an ADI with no plans of quitting and becoming an examiner. But yeah, it's definitely a role that you've got to do a lot of research on. Make sure you understand what's expected of you. Understand as well what you're going to earn. Because one of the things I saw before I signed up was I saw this thing. I can't remember the driving school, but I won't name them anyway. And it was earn 50K a year, you know, and I think it was like pre tax in the small print. I'm sitting here thinking, oh, that'd be nice, you know. Make sure you're realistic with everything, you know. Go into it eyes wide open, know what's expected of you. You know, if you're not very good at being watched, of course, by examiners, maybe by friends and family who like to jump in the car. I think I've had that twice. Then have a good hard think about whether this is something you want to do, because it's good fun, but it can be quite stressful for me anyway.
Some really important messages there. I think the incidents on the road, we could probably make an episode out of that on its own. I'm going to be pestering you after this episode. We're going to do it again, and we're going to share tales of a driving instructor and the incompetence of some road users. But
I'd be more than happy.
it is a challenge, and it's the reality of the job we do. You know, we've got to be watching the pupil, and we've spoke about it, like you have to be watching your pupil for what they're doing, but we've got to be watching the van driver that's going to go straight ahead from a left turn only lane, the car that's been tailgating, it's going to overtake in a minute, and what are we going to do with our pupil? How are they going to react to it?
Yeah,
And being aware of some of those situations and what can happen, because I've seen some stupid things on the road, and we've still got to manage the risk for us and our learners. I'm not going to
yeah.
start this one. I'll keep you here all night. We are not doing it. The one I'd just like to add about earn 50K a year, that seems to be a good marketing campaign at the minute.
Mhm.
And if you run the numbers, you might hit a turnover of 50K, but what you want to look at is profit.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And know your costs as well, because that's something big. You Unless you're going to go down the road of perhaps joining a big national school where your car is included as part of the franchise package, you've got to have some money behind you, to, of course, get a car, get the dual controls, get the insurance. That was the biggest thing for me when I started, because I was only 24 when I started, and I thought £1,000 for the insurance on the car that I'd got would be fine. No, I I was lucky to get anything under about 1,300. My first quote was nearly 2 grand. I was like, I can't afford this. In fact, this year is the first year where it's actually dropped below £1 grand. Be aware of the costs, before you go into it. And just quickly come back to the training. Don't skimp on the training either. The 40 hours for your trainee license is the minimum. You might need more. I think I did, include my part two stuff, I did about 75 hours, I think, overall. Don't skimp on it, because if this is what you want to do it properly.
Invest in this because it's an investment in a career. And I think it's a rewarding career. And you can make reasonable money and you get good job satisfaction if you enjoy seeing people develop. And it's not a driving job. It's very much a person job.
Yeah,
And you've got to be good with people.
definitely.
Again, we can delve. I'm going to get to some listeners' questions. Do you mind if we go through them?
Go for it.
So before we get to listeners' questions, here is your discount code from our sponsors, Knowledgeably Instructor Training. The discount code is MSP10 for 10% off their client-centered learning, Part 3 and Standards Check in-person award-winning workshop. So that is discount code MSP10. The first question we've got is from Paul. We've covered it a little bit, so let's see if we can get specific with this one. Any tips for part two training?
get a trainer that actually knows like what's expected. Of course, like we've already touched on, it's not an advanced driving test, but it's not a normal learner driving test either. Make sure they know what is required of you, and yeah, make sure that you are driving to a good standard. You do some hours with a trainer so that you go into it knowing that you're going to get through it on your first attempt and not necessarily your third.
The way the current test wait time is, we need to be getting really through part two first time as soon as we can, because the test is just that they're not there. So at the time of filming this, if people are watching this in 5 years' time, hopefully the DVSA have managed to get some structure. But right now, yeah, you've got as much confidence as me.
Yeah, I mean that's why I was so shocked when I got a part three date through literally for the week after they phoned me, because I've known of people waiting months for part twos. Um, so yeah, you definitely want to try your best. Like any test, I suppose, you want to try and get it through at first time, especially when you only have those three attempts. So coming back to it, don't scrimp on your training and get a trainer that knows what they're talking about.
Great advice. The next question from Stefan. I'm going to have to mix this up, but I'll see your answer first. What's your best advice for a PDI on their last attempt at part three?
So again, get some decent training. Not saying that the training they've had isn't decent, but look at why you haven't passed the previous two attempts. Was it your nerves getting the better of you? Was it the wrong pupil? Was it something you were doing, like not spotting the fault, or if you're spotting it, not dealing with the fault? If it's nerves for you or your pupil, have a look at a workshop that can help you deal with that, because there are some really good ones out there. If it's something you're doing, then yeah, get some training on it. Get a trainer that will sit in the back of a car and watch you on lessons. Really, really try and develop yourself. And when you go in for your final attempt, try and put that out of your mind, because obviously that's going to play a really big part of being in the back of your mind. If I don't get through this, it's all wasted. If I don't get through this, it's all wasted. I mean, it's not all wasted. You've just got to start the process again and wait for your theory to expire, but it's cost. Put that out of your mind. Don't think about it. Deliver what your pupil needs and make sure that you deliver it really as best as you can. If they make a fault, deal with it. Don't wait, because it could be the difference, in my example, between a 27 and a 39.
I'm glad you delved a little more than get good training. I had a feeling get good training was coming. There's a bit of a theme through this episode. Great information, though. Like, we need to reflect on why we're getting the results we're getting,
Yeah,
and what is it. I liked what you mentioned about the nerves, and there absolutely are people that can help with that in our industry, because you might have all the knowledge, you might have all the skills, but it's a test, and not everyone likes it when we use that word. But there are people that can help with the that side of it.
yeah, definitely. And yeah, like you say, reflect on yourself. Look at the scores you've got in your previous two part threes and see what's lacking. Is it the goal setting? Is it the risk management? Is it the techniques? Look at all of that and try and put a plan together and work on it. Don't not work on it. Don't go into your part three trying new things that you think, oh, this might work this time, but I've never practiced it before. You know, go through it with your pupils beforehand. Don't go into it blind, but definitely reflect.
Love that. Next question from Justine. What advice would you give to others starting out on this journey? What is needed and not needed?
So, mentioned it a fair bit. Do your research, know what you're getting yourself in for, um, know the costs, and yeah, look at what you don't need to do. You know, if you're someone who, yeah, you can afford the training and all of that, but maybe the membership to a particular organisation isn't necessary. Don't get it. Wait until you qualified. Yeah, do your research. It is really important. I spent days and days just sat on my laptop going through everything before I even registered and did my DBS check because I wanted to make sure if this is something I'm going to do potentially for the rest of my career, I want to know what I'm getting myself in for. It is really important.
How did you get that information?
Lots of Googling. I went onto various groups on Facebook as well. Um, some aren't as good as others, so you definitely want a little bit of a pinch of salt with some of that. Um, again, look into the training side of things, go on recommendations, go on reviews. Yeah, lots of Googling, bit of social media, bit of calling around as well. I'm very lucky that I've got a family friend who is an ADI, and I was able to speak to him. And I think he called me a nutter at first, but hey, we're here now. So yeah, lots of Googling, try and see if friends, family know someone who does the job, or even just pick up the phone, speak to an instructor, maybe not necessarily the one that's going to be direct competition, but speak to someone and be like, I'm thinking of doing this. What's it like?
All the things that I didn't do before becoming a driving instructor.
Well, you're still here, what, 4 years in? So,
Yeah, we made it through somehow. No idea how, but here we go. 4 years. My badge is due for renewal soon. And the reason I asked that question was very much I didn't do the research, and the research that I did, as most people can imagine, I typed it in Google and three big names come up, and I'm then just I'm price matching the three big
yeah.
schools, and I wasn't looking for quality. I was looking at these are going to do it for this much. That's the cheapest. I'm going to get 40 hours from all three of them, so I might as well pay the least amount for the 40 hours. Little did I know that actually investment at that stage would have paid dividends later down the line. I mean, I lost 200 quid straight away on two failed part ones. Like, that could have
Ooh.
saved me 200 quid if I'd have just passed that first time. So, yeah, I think hearing what you did and how might help people not fall into the same kind of path that I did, where I did very little research at all.
Yeah, know what you're getting yourself in for. When you're looking at your training, like you put into Google driving instructor training, and all the big names come up of, oh, we can get you through your part three and your part two for only £1,000, or I think that's what it was when I was looking, and I just thought, okay, well, let's have a little look at that then, and then you go through and it's got all these attachments of, you still have to pay their franchise even if you fail, which that's a lot of money, potentially depending on who you go with. Um, you know, read the contracts that they might get you to sign. It might tie you in. Um, in the end, I didn't go for any of them. I I paid by the hour for my training, and yeah, I spent nearly four times as much as I could have done. But I know that hopefully got decent training that got me through instead of like even virtual reality stuff. It's not the same. Know what your training company is going to give you. Speak to your trainer, and don't just go for the cheapest. It is really, really important.
What's interesting on reflection I paid for that package before I even knew what being a driving instructor was all about. And I think that's really important. I was fortunate. I came from a teaching background, but you need to know what you're walking into,
Yeah,
that and what this job is. And like what you said, speak to ADIs, speak to people doing the job. I have no issues talking to anyone. It wouldn't bother me if it was my next door neighbor who's like, Josh, I want to be a driving instructor. I'm like, okay, do you want to work for me? No, I'm going to do it on my own. But fine, I'll still
mm,
help because there's enough work out there for us. And I've mentioned it many times. If you're coming across an instructor that doesn't want to give you advice and help, you've probably done well to avoid them anyway. Like, I'm not saying every ADI is going to spend 3 hours on an evening on the phone to you, but I think most would be willing to have a quick chat and just talk about the ins and outs of the job and how they find it, and maybe point you towards a reputable trainer in the area as well. They're
yeah, definitely.
not always online and got this big online presence. There are some excellent trainers that kind of go under the radar and are just on reputation locally.
Yeah, very much like you as a driving instructor. I imagine a lot of your pupils are word of mouth or reputation reviews. Same with trainers. The good trainers, you know, they're there. Go and speak to people. Find out who they trained with. Did they like it? Obviously, I've said a lot on this how I felt coming away from my training sessions, and the only reason I'm not with that company, that franchise anymore, is because I wanted to give it a go by myself. They were amazing, and I said to my trainer who owns the company, I said, "This isn't a goodbye. This is a see you later." And like I said, I still talk to him after my part three. We did a lovely photograph together, and he sent me a really, really nice and quite inspiring message after that as well, which I'll admit actually nearly brought me to tears. It was lovely, and that's what you want, And he's very much reputation. Obviously, I've passed him on to loads of other people. Um, go with someone you can speak to.
Love that. Are there any final messages you would like to share, or any mentions of kind of what helped you along the way if people are needing that support? Any final messages from you?
Um, Obviously, definitely look into it. Know what you're getting yourself in for. Get someone decent, um, and enjoy the process. That's quite an important thing. Enjoy it. It's mad. It's brilliant, and it is so rewarding. Having a pupil who has been struggling with something, and then suddenly it's just like, oh, you're absolutely smashing that. Um, I've had that so many times, and that's probably the best part is seeing you go, yeah, how did that go? That went bloody brilliantly. It's so good. And I definitely do want to mention my trainer as well, Paul Knott, Smart Drive UK, based in Sussex. I probably couldn't be where I am now without his help, his support, the support of his team as well. They were always at the end of the phone, still at the end of a WhatsApp message. Without that, I wouldn't be where I am, and I owe a lot of this to him.
Great message. What a great episode. I've really enjoyed tonight, Joe. Thank you so much for your time this evening and talking about your story into the industry.
You're always welcome. It's been nice to share it because if it can help even just one PDI or maybe even a newly qualified ADI, then that's great. That's what we're here for.
It's great. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So thank you to our sponsors, Knowledgeably Instructor Training. You can find their award-winning content at www.adikit.co.uk. So make sure you head over there and check out what content they're offering. You could also check out Talking Send with Dr. Julia Malkin, MBE. And this is an online subscription and lots of videos to help driving instructors understand their neurodiverse learners. At the time of filming, there's over 60 videos that you can access, short, specific videos to help you understand your learners, and then you can reference back to them if needed. And if you are going to sign up there, you can use the code MSP25 for 25% off your first month's membership. So you can find that on Facebook or the membership on Patreon at Talking Send with Dr. Julia Malkin, MBE. Thank you for listening. I hope you all enjoyed. I'll catch you next week for the next episode.